So Mark, you've got a great business here. How did you get started and where is it going now?
So Rocks Brewing Company, we started 6 years ago, and it actually happened by chance on a ghost tour of the Rocks. And we walked through one day, and I've always in the back of my mind starting a beer company, and somebody said, why don't you call it Rocks Brewing Company? And we went from there. I've got almost sixth generation convict descendant. Wow. And we had some convicts in the first fleet, so a male and a female. So yes, we decided to start with Rocks Brewing Company.
So you've got beer on tap and you've had that for a while. Now you've got the pub. How has that influenced your branding and your story?
A lot. We started off with just beer on tap, and it was always in the business plan not to do anything bottles until we actually built a brewery. So we started with one beer. We've gone to 6 or 5 beers and a cider. So and we've got the full range now. So each of the beers have a name to them. They started off originally as the red ale was called the Burns Red Ale after Richard Burns, and that evolved into the Boxer Red Ale. So he was an Irish political convict, a bare knuckle boxer, big advocate of the Catholic Church. He donated some land to the Catholic Church in Australia. So each of our beers have a name as well and different stories. So the butcher, the boxer, the hangman. The hangman was actually Alexander Green. So he was the public executioner for about 40 years in Sydney and hung almost 400 people. And so there's a story behind each of our brands. The butcher is George Cribb, who was actually the butcher of the Rocks, also a sly grog maker. So he actually did a lot of, I guess he made the sly grog and also made a lot of money out of it because they couldn't work out why he owned so much land in the Rocks. So, and he actually, Richard Burns actually lived in his house. So there was a lot of interlinked stories over the Rocks in the early days. So we brought it back into, as in Rocks Brewing Company is always the head brand with all the sub-brands underneath.
That's a great idea because if you're selling your beer interstate, people in Perth, people in Tasmania, even overseas, they may not necessarily know about the Rocks, but they know about Australia and about convicts. Yep. And that side of history. So what else have you done to develop and create that brand?
So with the Hangman and the Governor, we've decided to put colours with them as well. So each beer has its own unique colour. And as you can see, we've got actually the blue for the Hangman, the golden for the Governor, the red for the Boxer. That's
a fantastic idea.
So and the actual colours do actually represent the beer as well. So obviously red for the Boxers are red ale. It was a pickpocket cider, it was actually green for the apples. So it's a very much it does relate to the beers.
So Mark, it's a really good idea to have a consistency throughout your branding. So if you're using, you're using the yellow for the golden ale, keep it throughout. Any product that you're using with that beer in mind, whether it's on your website, your social media, your packaging, what it creates is a story. So it doesn't matter if you're here in Sydney, you could be in Melbourne, you could be in Perth, Hobart. As soon as they see that beer in that colour, they recognise your beer specifically.
Definitely, and we have taken that the colour across all the brands. So across like the Hangman decal, and it's got the blue, obviously the Hangman. It's gone across also into the bottles as well. So you can see the Hangman in the blue, and on the 6-packs and on the cases as well. So and the blue goes right through the branding. So. And
that connects your beer on tap with your beer bottles. So if I'm in a pub and I'm the 10th person in a row waiting for beer, visually I can instantly see the blue. I can see that beer and I know what I'm going for. It's really important. Colours are really emotional. When you're talking about brand, we're talking about what your customers see as your brand, not necessarily what we see. So if they have a feeling, an emotion, a mood about a colour, they'll instantly gravitate to it. So they walk into a bar, they instantly see that one there and it's blue, they go, yes, it's mine. That's what I want. That's what I'm going for, which is a really good thing. So keeping your history is really important, and the fact that you're slightly moving away from the idea of the Rocks and going across to the Hangman and the actual convicts, people in Australia resonate with that. That's great. That's a great thing. People overseas, think about Australia, you think about convicts. So that's a really good thing as well.
So we're really starting to push with our brand is the brew with conviction and using the convict arrow, which is the actual English broad arrow. So you can see there is the convict arrow and it's a brew with conviction. Very simple on wood or any kind of material we can find. But it's the arrow here is the important part which we want to use as little creatures do, is use the Cupid. We very much similarly want to use this as our activation point that people see that and realise and remember the brand.
So where have you put that? Have you started putting that anywhere? Because as soon as I see that, I want to remember.
Not yet, and that's our next stage. We're really going to start now is pushing the arrow and the brew with conviction. So all the bottle tops will have with the arrow on top, the t-shirts, hats, anything branding is going to be now as the brew with conviction with the arrows coming through. So that'll be a sub-brand of the Rocks Brewing Company.
Have you done any research? Have you done any market research on this? Do you know who your target market is?
Our target market is basically 25 plus, basic beer drinkers. But at the same time, it is discerning beer drinkers. So people want to spend a little bit more money on beer. You'd have to go with the premium imported beer. So people will pay a little bit more money for a Stella or a Peroni or the international beers. They're the people we want, because the people that have got the Australian mainstream beers, it's ingrained in their body. So it's very hard to convert those guys, and they're the ones that actually don't want to spend money on a good product. They're pretty much set on drinking their normal beer. So we want somebody who wants the show-off factor. Hey, it's a new beer, it's a new craft beer. Show their mates, this is what I'm drinking. I know my beers. It is a bit more of a show-off factor.
Is it a matter of educating your clients? Because as we go through, as you change, as you grow organically, you really need to educate your current customers and make the new customers aware. So how do you make them aware of the new tastes, the new beers?
So at Hearts Pub is, we've only got certain touch points with our customers. So the biggest touch point we have is at the bar. So we always make sure our bartenders here know all the beers on tap. One of the worst things they have to do when they come on, because it's not just our beers, it's 6 other craft beers on tap, they've got to taste all the beers. When there's a new beer on, they've got to taste it and learn about it and know what it is. So when people come in asking for a beer, they've got to be able to push people in the right direction. And it's not just trying rocks beers, it's about trying craft beer in general. So I always say we're not pie eaters, we're bakers. We want to bake a bigger pie for the craft beer industry.
Absolutely. What about the branding side of it? How have you found some of the challenges with having two products and a service? Okay.
Yes, definitely across the different venues. So and it is very hard because we started as a beer company, and then we took over a pub, and we've actually signed a lease on another pub as well, and then also the brewery. So we're going to be 3 venues in the next 6 months, so as well as the brewery. So it's more about pushing the brand of, it's the conviction and the convicts, and it's not about the location of the rocks, because we were never about the rocks location. It was always about the conviction of the convicts and the early settlers, and how harsh it was, and how hard it would have been for them back there, as in growing up in a country that basically they didn't choose to come here. So.
And I think it's about being organic with your brand. You know, you're growing as a business, which is great. So you're going from tap to pub, to another pub, to bottled beer, to a brewery. If you keep the consistency throughout, just like any business, if you keep your brand flowing throughout all of it, then it will be more recognisable. It's an instant thing. There is so much competition out there now, and there's so many different beers that you want people to instantly think, yes, that's the beer I want, or that's the bottle I want, because you may not have the pub there. You may not have people offering you beer. You may just walk into a bottle shop. You know, how do I pick your beer? Have you attended any events outside of your pub and promoted your beer? Any tastings? Any food?
Definitely.
Food.
We do festivals all around the country. So anywhere that has, we do festivals everywhere. Basically, if there's a beer festival, especially if there's bottled product in that area, or there's a pub in the area that actually takes care of our brand, we will be there as well. So. So with the Hangman and these ones, that's our character range. So we've got the 6 beers and that. We're never going to add any more characters to that. So, but what we are doing with the brewery is we're going to have seasonal releases. So every 3 or 4 months, we'll bring out new beers, and that'll be called the Conviction range. So basically a Conviction IPA for an Indian Pale, Conviction Hefeweizen, or a Conviction whatever the different beers are.
Fabulous, yeah.
But it's knowing the people with the Rocks Brewing and a character range, they get to know that brand, and they know the quality and the consistency of it. When they see Rocks Brewing, they know this is a good beer. I've tried that one before. I'll try their Conviction range.
So will that be on a limited time?
Yes, limited time, limited series, limited pubs, and also if they will do barrel aged beers, we'll have a higher range, higher alcohol ones. So there's different, but it's always going to be Rocks Brewing will be the overriding brand of it. So
that's a great idea, especially since your target market is 25 to 35-year-olds. Think about who they are. You know, they're quite fast and savvy. They're entrepreneurial. They like change. They like tasting new things. They like building up their own palate, so to speak. So having that limited range forces them to come in, try it at that time.
Definitely.
If you can get it in their face, in their minds, at the back of their heads, subconsciously, it's great for them. They'll come in, they'll try it then. They know they expect a new beer 3 months later, or whatever the limit is, which is a great thing for you. It keeps you fresh.
Yep.
You know, the problem with a lot of the beers, they've been out for the last 50 years, 60 years. So being fresh and being organic with your beer and being and flowing it from season to season, keeping your mainstream ones is a great idea in a branding perspective. And if you can do that interstate, that's great. I mean, it's great here in Sydney. We know the rocks. We know these areas as somebody who lives in New South Wales, but somebody in Perth may not. Somebody in the Northern Territories may have no idea about that. So if you can get out there and promote that side of your business, it'll be a great benefit to you in the long run as well.
With the seasonal release as well, with the conviction range, is we look to the US, because we're always 10 to 15 years behind the trends, what's happening there. And 2 years ago in the US was Indian Pale Ales and American style Pale Ales were the #1 selling style of beer over there. It's now changed to seasonal beers. So the market over has changed, and they know craft, and they've been introduced to these craft beers. Now they're looking for something different. They're looking for something new all the time. So this brings us back to our conviction range. So every 3 to 4 months, we'll be bringing out a new beer all the time. So just to keep people interested, so they know their character range. So our beers, our core beers, are going to be always consistent and good quality. And then if they know Rocks always brings a good quality, consistent beers, hopefully it'll transfer into, see a Rocks, a seasonal beer, they'll be able to jump straight on that as well.
So if you're going to bring it across to the States, how is that brand? You know, is it the same brand that you're bringing across? Is it consistent? Have you maintained that?
That'll be the fun part, is actually exporting the US, because the Americans love the fact we're a bunch of convicts in Australia.
Absolutely.
So to take the convict lager or to sell the stories of the Rocks and the convicts and the brew with conviction is, I think that's an easy sell to the US. And but taking the UK as well, it's like with the convicts, we're sending the convicts back.
You're going back.
So we're sending it back to the UK. So, but it's also the Asian market as well. How that translates into the Asian markets might be a tougher sell, but anything Australian they love as well. So, but at the end of the day, it comes back, it's got to be a quality product. If the beer's not good, they're not going to drink it.
And it's about educating your customers. So how you educate them in Asia, it may be a lot different to the way you educate them in the States and back to England. But it's about educating them on the tastes, on the actual products and the additional products around them, and they will eventually develop and grow with you. I mean, that's the whole point. If you can bring them across with you, if you can maintain a particular brand across Australia and then internationally, so that it doesn't matter if an Australian is travelling in the States, great, I see that beer, that I feel like home, it feels like me. You know, if you can carry that across each country, it's a great thing. I think one of the main things you need to remember is that it's got to flow, so to speak. It's got to flow and be organic. So you have to be willing to change. You may need to change your brand a little bit as time goes, depending on each country, the culture of the country, how much beer they drink. Are they beer drinkers? You may need to slightly change it so that you educate them and bring them up, so to speak, to love your beer. Yep. But keep the core. You know, your core is the convicts. You know, now that's the core of it. Your core is certain colours. For the 6 beers, that's the core there. Then you've got the conviction beer. So if you actually keep that as the basis and then slightly change your brand for each country maybe, each culture, then you'll see that the actual product, which is the whole business, not just one beer, but all your beers and your services will grow as one.
It's a great thing about being a small company as well, is that we can actually change very quickly.
Yeah.
We don't have to be the bigger beer companies. Basically, if they were to bring out a new beer, it'd take them 12 months of development, research, and then to do the marketing campaigns. It's 2 years before it actually gets to the product on the shelf, where my brewer can have a crazy idea to do a beer, and basically 2 weeks later, we've got it in our kegs and basically pouring on tap. And then putting the marketing and branding behind that. That's something basically, if something's not working or we try and introduce something, we can slowly introduce it. As you can tell with here is actually we've gone from the Hangman was our first beer we did, and it was actually about the Hangman, and Rocks is very much in small print on the top, where we've gone now to the Governor, which is basically the Rocks is pretty much the dominant part of it, and the Governor's on top. So we're slowly changing, learning from our mistakes, which we can easily do, which is a great thing about being a small craft company.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're actual mistakes. They're just part of
learning curve.
Yeah, it's just part of creating a brand, and you may be able to do it all in-house, which is great. And sometimes you may need to outsource. Yep. You know, have you outsourced at all? Have you needed to outsource any help in branding?
Not in branding. When we originally started, Jack Watts Curry is a agency here in Sydney that I've used before in past life. That basically they helped us with the original Rocks logo. As for branding, no, it was pretty much all in-house myself and my, pretty much in-house. So.
Is that because you're a beer drinker?
It's because of beer, and I love beer and get to see it all. And you know what it is, and it's a lot of research, a lot of time and effort in other pubs and drinking a lot of beer. So
somebody's got to do it.
It's a terrible business to be in. So
yeah, so I think for any business, as long as you know who your target market is, as long as you are consistent throughout all your products and services, little bit more difficult for you because you've got products and services. You've got products and services in New South Wales, interstate, and then products, services, New South Wales, interstate and overseas eventually. So it's growing. So as long as you're consistent and you're willing to change it, keep the core but be organic in other areas, then that's a sure sign for success. Read and understand who your clients are, who your customers are, because ultimately a brand isn't what you think it is. A brand is what your clients say it is. If they love your brand, if they love the bottle, you've got a great shaped bottle as well, for male and female. It's not big and bulky. It's nice and slim. It's tall. You've got a great top for it. You may need to put that arrow on the top of those bottles.
Yep, we are. That's our next thing we're going to do. The problem is with the. You have to buy at least 100,000 bottle tops at one time.
Minor detail,
but we will get there. We will get there.
But that's growing. So as long as you can be consistent in that, and remember that when you're branding, you're branding for today. You've had the past. You've learned from the past. You're branding for today, but always keep in mind what's in the future.
Definitely.
Whether it's 6 months, whether it's 12 months ahead. Think, okay, what can we use now from what we've got to develop and to grow as a business? Because ultimately, as a medium to small business, we need to grow with that. We need to develop that.
Yep.
So, is there any questions you'd like to ask?
More with how would you see us actually bringing the Brew with Conviction and the arrow into where we're going with the company going forward? Because is it a mechanism for us to actually develop the brand and push the brand, so when people see that arrow, they recognise that it's part of Rock's Brewing Company?
Research if anybody else uses the arrow and why they use the arrow. It may be for a totally different reason, and it may conflict with what you're using it for. So be careful on that, and then plaster it everywhere. It's like any product. It's like McDonald's. You see the arches, you instantly see it. So you would be putting the arrow on the beer bottles. You would be putting it on your coasters. So you could be using it in your promos, on your website. Keeping it consistent, so as soon as I see that arrow, I know I'm talking about your beer. I want your beer.
Yeah.
It's and internationally as well. That's the other thing though. When you're looking internationally, it doesn't mean anything overseas.
Getting them to know what it is.
Getting them to know what it means. Yeah. You've got, we spoke about all the different colours. Great. So that's all the 6 things, the 6 different beers, and you've got your conviction beers. But how do you actually hold them all as one? How do you make them all one complete? And that is through the arrow. So how do you find the female market when you're branding? Have you specifically looked at that side of your branding?
Definitely have. The female market in Australia is definitely a growth market. They're willing to try different products and different beers and the taste. I always say the men have got probably a better palate, but the women have got a better descriptive of beers. Yes. So, and they don't want to be seen drinking. A lot of the females they always say it as like, I don't like drinking beer, it makes me bloated. Well, the difference between that's a lager and ales. Ales are less an atmosphere, so you don't get as bloated drinking ales is another big advantage. But also, there's nothing sexier than seeing a girl drink a nice craft beer. And there's actually nothing more intimidating than seeing a girl that knows more about beer than you do. So but it's also at the same time is girls are changing, going for the alco pops are not the cool thing to be drinking anymore. And wine is still always going to be popular, but beer is the new wine. It's going through as the more flavours come out, and there's more different flavours. And it's also the girls actually drinking a lot of the darker beers, not just the lighter beers and the crisp beers. They actually like the dark beers because there's chocolate flavours and toffee and caramels and different things coming through the beers.
So have you had to research that side of your market?
Definitely. When we say research, our research is at beer festivals, and it's basically asking the girls, if you give them 3 different beers, and light beers and a red beer, and they'll definitely shy away from the red. So you've got to convince them to try it. And once they try it, they go, that's fantastic, they love it. So getting them to try the beer is one of the hardest parts. So how we can do that. But once the females get on it, they realise it. There's so many different girls in Australia that actually love and are passionate about craft beer as well.